Welcome back to the PolitBureau. Now, on the 26th of June 2013, Nkululeko Gwala, a leader of Abahlali BaseMjondolo, was shot and killed in Ethekwini municipality. Now, testifying before the Mwerane Commission of Inquiry investigating the political murders in the province of KZN, a leader of Abahlali BaseMjondolo told the inquiry about Gwala's last hours before he was killed.
Ngaphambi kokuthi ashone uNkululeko saba ne conversation naye saxoxa naye.
Before he died, we had a conversation, myself and him, Nkululeko.
I would say 2 hours before ashone ngaba nenhlanhla yokuxoxisana naye.
That conversation happened 2 hours before his death.
Conversation yayithi kimi wayengitshela ukuthi impilo yakhe isengcupheni.
He was informing me that his life was in danger.
Lokho kuthinta izikhulu eziphezulu kumasipala weTheku ezithi uyiveza inkohlakalo.
That included the high-rank officials of Ethekwini municipality who were saying he was uncovering corruption.
Ezwakalisa ukuthi akaphephile ngoba kuyacaca ukuthi information anayo ngenkohlakalo ekhona implicator ke izikhulu lezi.
He was concerned about his safety because the corruption that he was uncovering implicated these high-rank officials.
All right, gentlemen, let me bring you back in. Professor Pithouse, let me ask you to have the first bite here. You following very closely what is happening in KZN. First of all, Mr. Zigote there is talking about high-ranking ANC officials who were clearly involved in the plotting of the murder of Mr. Nkululeko Gwala, who ultimately was killed. Does this lend more credibility to these accusations that ANC leaders are behind these killings?
There are a number of senior ANC leaders who've worked in the city and the province over the years who are either on record as having made statements or who are alleged to have made statements in which it's quite clear that they don't take the view that the kind of disputation that people like Sbuza Kode are involved in, which is democratic disputation, is legitimate. They've often used a language that is militarized, that casts people who are organizing on a democratic basis as the enemy, you know, as a kind of vehicle for a foreign conspiracy, often as a third force. Now, this is the language of the Cold War, of the anti-apartheid struggle. And it's often framed in a way, sometimes with idiomatic language, that lends itself to a reading that violence would be legitimated. Now, in the case of Nkululeko Gwala, shortly before he was killed, I think it was that day, the newspapers reported that 2 senior people from the ANC, including the chairperson, Dr. Dlomo, were there in the neighborhood where he lived and had made clear threats against him. Now, that's been reported in newspapers. Now, of course, exactly how you tie up a public threat with an assassination that follows shortly afterwards is not clear. You know, whether they're direct links or indirect links. But I think if we really want to get to the bottom of this, we need to investigate these things very thoroughly. Because the kind of accusation that Sbuza Kode is making there doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes out of somewhere, and it requires very careful, open-minded, fair and rigorous examination to get to the bottom of how these things actually happen.
Mr. Mashel, Mr. Zigote there, also importantly, what he mentions there is that this had made the senior officials, or senior officials of the city, should we say, very uncomfortable that he was now in possession of this information about corruption that's been going on. What does it tell us about the lengths that these officials are willing to go to eliminate the threat of being exposed for corruption? And does it tell us anything new about perhaps what people or ANC leaders are willing to do if they're going to be exposed?
Well, one, it tells us that the ANC the soul of the ANC has been captured by criminals. That people we think are leaders are actually criminals using offices to amass wealth. So let's be blunt about it. That's number one. Number two, that these people are prepared to do anything, including killing, to protect themselves. Number three, it actually also tells us a disturbing thing, that actually the commission will not help. Because if you have senior leaders of the ANC being involved in political matters, these are people who have influence on structures and discussions within the ANC. These people are not going to listen to some commission that is outside the party. They will do everything in their power, given the positions they hold in the ANC, to make sure that they protect themselves. So whatever the commission will come up with, I'm sorry to say, it's not going to help, because you have very senior leaders of the ANC involved in this thing. So they will make sure that nothing happens.
Professor, one of the alarming things here about these murders is that of the 89 people that we are told died between the period 2014 to where we are now, not a single person has been arrested. Firstly, what does it tell us about law enforcement and their willingness to investigate these murders independently of any influence? And is it a factor, the fact that senior government or senior governing party officials are alleged to be involved here in plotting these?
When people are murdered at that scale and there's no arrest, there's no conviction, like in the Glebelands hostel, the figures given 89, sometimes 95 murders, and not a single conviction. Clearly, at the very least, there's a complete lack of concern for those people's lives, at the very least. But one has to take very seriously the possibility that it's more than a simple contempt for those people's lives, that somebody is telling somebody not to investigate this. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, there have been incidences where people have been convicted, but that has come out of sustained struggle and organization. It hasn't just happened on its own. So, I mean, I think we are dealing with a situation in which there's effectively a kind of license to kill.
Sure.
You know, exactly how that's allocated, how it works, you know, that needs to be established, but there does appear to be a license to kill.
Those are very profound words. Mr. Mashele, what's the risk to South Africa's democratic project if these killings and assassinations are allowed? I mean, Professor Peterhouse was talking about a license to kill here.
It means that killings will become our political culture. In other words, we'll now accept killings as part of the normal game of politics, and that's very dangerous. That essentially would mean the collapse of the state as we know it. It means that someone who is watching TV now, who is unhappy with what I say, can organize a gang or a hitman to come and shoot me. Now that's very dangerous. The question is, why is this thing allowed to happen? It is allowed to happen because, as we can see, there are ANC people who are involved in it. And the ANC, by the way, runs government. So it means that you have a rogue political party running the state. So South Africans must decide, what do you do with a rogue political party? Because if we don't do something about this thing, all of us are going to be killed. So it means that we are in danger as a society, because the party that is supposed to govern us, it is the party that is now killing people.
Professor Peterhouse, I'm going to put the exact same question. What's the risk here to South Africa's democratic project if these are allowed to happen, and, to use your words, there is some kind of license here for people to go in and eliminate others who are going to expose malfeasance?
Well, it's already the case that many people in different parts of KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban and elsewhere, don't inhabit a democracy. They already inhabit a political space in which the death threat, assault, sometimes murder, torture, are routine forms, normalized, everyday forms of political control. I inhabit a democracy, but there are some people in a place like, say, Kwandangezi or Cato Crest who don't. The risk for wider society is if we allow this to fester in certain spaces that are outside of the kind of concern of mainstream elite society, they will not remain there. I think you're quite correct. I think it would only be a matter of time before you find a journalist or an MP in an opposition party or a dissident MP in the ANC turning up dead in a back alley somewhere. You know, this happens in Russia. It happens in a number of places, and it doesn't happen overnight. It comes from somewhere. So if we are not able to confront this now, deal with it now, it's going to spread into wider society.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to ask us to pause there for a moment. The Politburo continues after the break.